All right, we are at the top of the hour, so now we get started. Welcome everybody to our Guava webinar today, Unified Archiving with Retain. My name is Sheldon Mills. I'm a marketing manager here at Guava, and I'm here with Q Mangus. He is the Director of Product Marketing here at Guava. I just want to start off by thanking everyone for attending this webinar and hope you'll benefit from all the information we're presenting today. We do have a couple quick announcements. First off, and as I'm sure many on this webinar have heard, Guava has recently been awarded the Best Overall Value and Champion for Content and Email Archiving by Infotech, the Infotech Research Group, which is awesome, but I won't go into any details as I think Q's going to talk about that a tiny bit later on. But that was a great honor for Guava, to be sure. And second, we've launched our newly redesigned and revamped guava.com website. It's much more powerful with many more resources, but it's also much easier to use and navigate. So if you haven't already checked that out, go to guava.com and you can see our new website. And the last announcement, as we're actually going to be changing the format of our webinars. We're planning on having more of an interview-style webinar. We'll be doing live video broadcasts, and we're going to have more subject matter experts and hopefully, fingers crossed, right, have a more entertaining and engaging webinar format. So look forward to that in the coming weeks and months, and we hope you can join us for that as well. But today, we're going to have a Q&A session addressing the most frequent questions we get regarding the best practices of archiving and retain and, well, a lot of stuff. I'll be fielding some of the questions, and Q will be answering them. And for those of us, it looks like we had a few of us join late, Q is the Director of Product Marketing here at Guava. We have a number of frequently asked questions we want to get through. However, if you have any questions as we go through the webinar, please put them in the Q&A panel or the chat panel, and Q will be sure to address those. And you just do that by, there's a chat panel or a Q&A, both of those, Q and I should both be able to see that and be able to answer and address any questions you have. So please feel free and please ask any questions you have. Q?
Yes, thanks, Sheldon, and thanks for that introduction. And welcome everyone to the webinar. We're really excited for you to be here. It looks like we have a large number of people on the call. That's exciting for us, and we really hope that you benefit from the topic here. And we're going to be touching on retain, some archiving topics, and some other things. We have a great number of questions here, so hope you enjoy what we're going to be presenting today.
Awesome. So why don't we just jump right into this? How about the first question? We get this all the time. What are some concerns that organizations have when it comes to archiving? Or I guess, really, why does my organization need to be archiving?
Great. Yeah, that's a great question. As Sheldon said, we do get that question a lot. I put together a little slide here to kind of help with that. But really, there's a lot of archiving concerns that organizations may have, and there's a lot of concerns that they may have that drive people to archive. So let me just touch on a few of those. So some things that you need to be considering when it comes to if you should be archiving and what you should be archiving and why. That's kind of what the question is that we get a lot. So there's a few items, first of all. There's the idea of being able to manage your data. We know that with electronic communication, email especially, there is so much data out there, right? There's so much that your employees are communicating. It's hard to know what's going on. It's hard to know what's being said, what information is being put out there. And so one of the ideas behind archiving is to be able to manage that data. So it's also this idea of information governance. So as you have people communicating, you can go back to the archive and get a feel for what your employees are sending via email, what they're talking about, what's being communicated with your employees. You're able to get some valuable insights into what is going on in your organization. So that's the idea of managing your data. There's another thing too, especially when it comes to email, is this idea of data silos. You've probably had this if you've used Exchange. You know that there's a chance that there's PSTs everywhere. And if you've used GroupWise, there's a similar thing with the personal archives. And those could be on everybody's personal machines. And they could be scattered throughout your organization. And so getting to those can be difficult. Being able to go back and see what has happened and what is going on in your organization can be difficult because there's these silos of data that are all over your organization. So that's another idea when it comes to managing your data, is having everything in one central location that can be easily searched and managed, and there can be e-discovery performed on that. I'll touch on that in just a moment here. Then there's the idea of your system slowing down. Once again, this is a big one when it comes to email, is that as your email system grows and the number of messages that are being sent and received, that system can slow down. And it can be bogged down with all these messages. Well, if you have an archiving solution, you can actually get those emails off of that email system. And now it runs more efficiently. And that's even if it's something in the cloud. It runs the same way. So let's say you're running Gmail or you're running Office 365. Even with that, even though these companies like Microsoft and Google have massive servers and give you massive amounts of storage for the most part, you still run into the fact that things can slow down. So that's why having an archive is important as well. So that's the idea there. I've kind of broken it up into topics. The one is managing your data. Now let me move on a little bit about compliance. So there is the idea of compliance. An archive is important for being able to comply with regulations. There's tons of regulations out there that deal with archiving and managing your electronic communication. And the regulations have evolved recently to where it doesn't just deal with email. You've got social media to deal with. You've got mobile communication, instant messaging. There's a lot, and you need to be able to manage that information and also be able to have it readily available to fulfill those requirements on compliance and on regulations, and then also to be able to search and get back to those messages. When it comes to compliance, once again, you have this idea of if you're involved in litigation, right, that if someone is to come along and you're to be sued, how quickly can you get to that data? Can you perform e-discovery on that data from one central location? And without an archive, that's hard. It's hard to go back and do that. So that's another part of it as well. Another part that I've broken it out into is this idea of productivity. So by having an archive, it actually can, help empower users. And what I mean by that is your end users can have access to their own archive, and so now they can go back and see old emails and be able to access them quickly. And if they accidentally deleted an email or there's an email in the archive that they need in their live system, they can go back and restore those emails themselves. So that's the idea here, is that by having an archive, you can reduce the amount of time that IT has to spend helping end users because they can help themselves. It also increases their productivity because they can quickly and easily find messages that they need. So productivity is a big one. And then the next one is reputation risk. That's a big one as well. So as I touched on, there's a lot of ways in which your your employees are communicating, and that could be internally or with your customers. And let's take an example of social media, right? It's really easy for an employee to go out there and post something that they shouldn't. Maybe it's something sensitive, something inappropriate, whatnot. You need to be able to have an archive to be able to go back and prove whether or not that kind of situation happened, whether or not information was shared that should not have been shared. So that's part of that, to help save reputation and be prepared, and prevent those types of things from being posted. And I'll touch on that a little bit later on how exactly the retained solution can help you with that. So really, that's the idea. Those are some of the things that have been brought up to us a lot, and some of the things that you need to be thinking of when it comes to archiving. And this is really why you should be archiving. There's also one other thing that I just thought of that isn't on this slide, and that's the idea of it's important to have a central archive. And I'll touch on that a little bit, but it's important to have one central location for all your information. I touched on that a little bit with silos of data. But this is something that with a lot of legacy archiving solutions, there is not a central archive. There's silos of data. Like they'll have one system for email, another system for social media, and another system for mobile, if they support it at all. And what you really need is one central archive for everything. So that's something that's a concern as well when you're looking at an archive solution.
Great. That's the why is always fundamental to. I mean, you have to know the why of archiving, and now I guess you've touched on that quite a bit. We also get asked a lot, so I understand why, but what there's so many different kinds of electronic communication. What should an organization archive, right? What should I be archiving? And then maybe you could also touch upon a little more of the regulations depending on industry.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah. So absolutely. Let me go. I think I have another slide on that. So there was two parts to that question, is what should be archived, and I think I did miss that. I think Sheldon already asked me that. But some of the things that should be archived, and actually regulations kind of demand that, is social media communication. So any social media communication that your employees are using while on the network, while on company time, should be reviewed and archived. And then you have mobile communication, text messages, phone call logs, those kind of things should be archived. And then you have instant messaging as well. So people who, they're using instant messaging tools like, say, Google Hangouts or Yahoo IM, those kind of messages need to be archived as well. And then, of course, email. And with email, it should be email messages, appointments, attachments, different tasks, those kind of things need to be need to be archived. And as I stated, there are regulations that demand that, but then there's also this idea of just being able to have access to all of your communication and be able to see what your employees are communicating and managing that data. So some of the regulations on this, as was asked, are kind of listed on the screen here. You have for healthcare, there's HIPAA and high tech, and those really touch on the need to be able to archive communication, mainly so that you can see what has happened, and also to prove that personal health information, PHI, has not been shared. So that's actually really important to be able to archive, to be able to prove that that your employees are not texting out personal information about their patients. Then you've got the Dodd-Frank Act that has to deal with financial institutions, as well as Sarbanes-Oxley. FINRA has a lot of regulations as well. SEC, MIFID, and the FSA. All these regulations really, what they're regarding is this idea that you need to archive all electronic communication. You need to be able to have those in a central repository where you can quickly and easily access them. And as an aside, on the Dodd-Frank Act in particular, if you're ever involved in a regulatory type audit, the Dodd-Frank Act is requiring that you produce the required information within 72 hours. So once again, it's important that you have a solution where you can quickly and easily get to that kind of stuff. And then, of course, you have FERPA and the Freedom of Information Act, which both have to deal with. The FERPA is about education, being able to that education organizations need to be able to quickly make available information that has been shared about students. And then with the Freedom of Information Act, as we're all really aware of, especially with recent news, that if something needs to be known, you can make a request to the government, and they need to be able to quickly produce information about said request. And so that's why it's important, once again, that government organizations archive their electronic communication so that they can quickly comply with a FOIA request. Oh, and finally, I did miss one. Sorry, cut you off there, Sheldon. And that's the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure. All organizations are subject to that, and that basically says that if you're involved in litigation, you need to be able to produce the pertinent messages that are involved in that litigation. And so that is where e-discovery will come in, and that's what the FRCP talks about.
Okay, cool. You you brought up one question, or brought up one thing we actually get a lot of questions about is social media in the workplace, right? So we get this question fairly frequently, actually. Should I allow my users to access social media at work?
That's great. Yeah, good question. This is a good one, and the reason why I say that is because it is a tricky thing. I won't lie that this can be tricky for you as an organization. What should you do when it comes to social media? And the piece of advice that I give people, and I'll share here as well, is um, first I'll just make a comment. Your employees are going to access it no matter what. They're going to be getting on Facebook. They're going to be tweeting out, and it depends, especially a younger workforce. They're going to be even more apt to do things on social media. Um, so we know that your employees are going to be on social media. So what does that mean for you? If you know they're going to be on there, what can you do? And the idea is try and manage it the best you can. And so what you want to do is you want to allow your employees to access social media, but then you want to be able to have oversight of what they do. And so a good thing and a good practice that we advise is to allow your employees to access social media via your network. And then you can implement a solution to help you monitor social media communication and filter it and block it if it's inappropriate. But now you've kind of taken the power back by allowing your employees to now access social media, access on the network. You have a little bit more control, and you have the ability to manage that. So the answer is yes, you should allow your employees to access social media at work. And there's a lot of benefits to it. They can easily communicate with customers. They can get your brand name out there. There are a lot of benefits to allowing your employees to access social media. However, there are risks too, and to help mitigate those risks, you should have a tool to help you monitor, and then of course archive social media communication. So the short answer is yes, and the long answer is yes for a reason. But yeah, just make sure that you have that oversight.
Awesome. Here's another question we get pretty frequently. So can an organization monitor and archiving something as personal as social media, really?
Good question. Yeah, once again, this is a little bit of a tricky area, and the reason being is, things are changing a lot, right? And they've changed a lot over the past few years. So social media can have personal information there, and so once again, this comes back down to something that I advise people to do, and that is you need a policy regarding electronic communication. I would venture to say that most people on this call have a policy when it comes to email communication. Actually, I have an interesting slide here that I'm going to just touch on in just a minute here, but which this slide just makes me think. So it just is a recent Osterman research white paper where he did a survey of a bunch number of organizations to see who was archiving what. And email, most organizations were archiving email. And so that leads me to believe that most organizations probably have a policy when it comes to how their employees use email. So what you need to do is make sure that policy is reviewed. You need to go back and see if that policy covers social media and instant messaging and texting. So the idea here is you need a policy that incorporates all electronic communication. And that policy needs to clearly state what an employee can communicate on any kind of platform. So what can they say if they're on social media? What can they say if they're using their smartphones when it comes to business? So that is where the idea behind, yes, social media can have personal information, and yes, that can be sticky. However, your policy should clearly state how and what your employees can do on social media. So if you're allowing your employees to access social media, you need them to know that you're monitoring it and archiving it. So that has to be clearly outlined in your policy that yes, they can access it, but we will have oversight of it. And if you have that and they sign that policy, then you're able to manage it and you're able to have oversight of communication, and they, as employees, will know that that's what you're doing. And so, yeah, it is kind of tricky, but it is something that you need to protect your company, and of course you need to protect your employees. So that's why it's important to monitor and archive social media and have that policy to reinforce it.
Awesome, great. Let's switch gears a little bit. Do you have any advice for archiving mobile devices? What about BYOD? That's pretty common nowadays for people to bring in their own devices.
Yeah, absolutely. That's another thing that, like we were just talking about with social media, people are going to be accessing it, and now we know with mobile, people are bringing their phones in, and they're asking or requesting or maybe even demanding that they use that phone to access their email, to access the network, to maybe communicate with customers on a daily basis. So once again, that's where you need to have a policy that clearly states what can and can't be done, and then you need to be able to have oversight. And that, once again, is as a concept, and I think with some of the questions that are coming up, I'll touch specifically on what Retain does. But as a concept, the idea is you need to be able to have a solution that gives you oversight of mobile communication as well. So that means if your employees are bringing their own devices, you need to be able to, and they want to use them in a work function, you need to be able to archive what they're texting and how they're calling. Now, there's a couple of ways to do that, and I'll touch on that in just a moment. But the idea with Retain is there's a way to archive everything on the phone, or there's a way to split the phone up when we're talking about BYOD to create a business persona and to have an app where that business persona is just used for business, and those communications are archived at the same time. So, and I'll touch on that in just a minute. But the idea is there's really two ways to do it. You can archive everything that's on that phone, or you can archive just the business communications by creating a dual persona on the phone. But my advice, and the question really is, what should we do about BYOD, is you need to have some sort of oversight on that. You can't just let employees have unfettered access to your network and unfettered communication with customers without some sort of oversight. That can get you in trouble.
All right. So you mentioned a little bit. Let's just go into more detail about how mobile archiving works with Retain, and then you mentioned earlier about the multiple devices, and well, actually, you didn't mention it. You mentioned multiple personas. Maybe you can go into a little bit about that, and then also what to do if a user has multiple devices that they're wanting to use, or work necessitates or whatever.
Perfect. Let's go. I think I have a slide here. 1 second. I have one that's all about Retain Mobile. Okay, so here's a little about Retain Mobile and how it works exactly. So I did touch on that, so great follow-up question there, Sheldon, because I wasn't clear on what it did. So first and foremost, as an overall high-level thing, Retain Mobile archives Android, BlackBerry, and iOS. Now, let me go into a little bit of detail on what each thing is. But basically, the idea is that Retain archives text messages, multimedia messages, phone call logs, BBM Protected, PIN messages, and encrypted communication. Let me touch on what each one of those means. So first, you have Android on our little list here on the screen. So with Android, there is an app that sits on the phone, and it monitors all text messages that are going on and all phone call logs, and it pulls those messages down it takes those messages and pushes them to Retain. via a collector. So it takes those, it pushes those to Retain. Now they're in the Retain archive. So there is an app that goes on the Android phones to be able to do that, and it will take all SMS and MMS messages, all phone call logs, and so everything that is on that phone is going to be, when it comes to communication, is going to be pushed to Retain and will be archived in context. So if I have text messages that I am communicating with someone else, it's going to show me all those text messages in context. It will show what I sent to that person, what they sent back. It will show group text. It will show all that in that context, so that you can go back and easily search and see what was actually being said and how it was being said. And the same goes for BlackBerry and iOS, meaning it's all in context. But for BlackBerry, it's specifically BBM, PIN, SMS, MMS, and phone call logs. And that's actually done via the BES, the BlackBerry Enterprise Service. So Retain talks to BlackBerry Enterprise Service. It pulls the data down, and it takes those logs that BES has and converts them into a format that is usable, that can be searched, and that is in context. And actually, if there's people on the call that are using BlackBerry and they have a BlackBerry representative, just know that Retain can be purchased directly through BlackBerry. They actually have OEM'd that, and it's called BlackBerry Audit and Archiving Service. So if there are BlackBerry people on here that have a BlackBerry rep and are purchasing that way, they can go directly through BlackBerry. Okay, now moving to iOS. What we do there is that we've partnered with a company called CellTrust, and they have created an app that actually creates a business phone number. It actually assigns a separate business phone number to the mobile device, and that separate phone number is just for business. So now, and this specifically we're talking about iOS, so if you have somebody on an iPhone, they can call and use iMessage for all their own personal stuff, but once they need to do stuff that has to do with business, they open up the CellTrust app, and now they can text, they can make phone calls. And if they do that internally, meaning from one CellTrust app user to another CellTrust app user, that's all encrypted, completely encrypted and secure. Now, if they text or call to somebody who's not a CellTrust user outside of the network, it's going to be encrypted up until it hits the carrier. So, but of course, now, and then of course Retain talks to the CellTrust server where all those communications are routed through. And let me show you a quick image of that. So Retain will talk to the CellTrust secure mobile server, and using the Retain collector, it will pull it down into the Retain archive. And now you can search that archive and perform e-discovery, etc. So the idea here is that now you have the ability to have your users bring their own device, bring an iPhone in, use the personal side for their personal stuff and the business side for the business stuff with that separate business phone number. And what's great is that then there's also an archive, and you have that oversight of what's going on. So you have that true enterprise-ready archiving for iOS with Retain, because you don't have to tether or sync the device. It's all done via that CellTrust app. And then just as an aside, CellTrust, that app also works on Android. So if you need to go down that road and have a separate persona, you can do that. And finally, with Retain Mobile, there's one other piece that I didn't mention, and that is BBM Protected. If you're familiar with BlackBerry Messenger Protected, great solution for encrypted communication. So that's basically BlackBerry or BBM Protected. You can install that on an iOS, Android, or BlackBerry. It gives you the ability to communicate between those two BBM protected users. So if I have it and another person has it, as we're communicating via BBM and sending those instant messages, those are all encrypted and secure. And then Retain integrates directly with the BBM protected app to pull the messages down. There's no need to have BES for that particular way of doing that. So once again, that gives you an option for having secure and encrypted communications no matter the device, and have a quick way to have oversight of that as well. So that's another option to give your employees to be able to have a separate business persona no matter the device. And of course, Retain archives that in a central archive that can be searched, and that they're in a context. So yeah, that's a little bit about Retain Mobile and how that works.
Awesome. We actually have a question in the Q&A queue. Sorry, Q&A queue.
Q&A queue.
This is for Q from the Q&A. Mike was wondering if our customer is already using Retain for email, how hard it is to add the SMS archiving from the Retain Social. Do you have to have a full-blown mobile device management, or is it easy to just add the SMS piece?
Perfect. That's a great question. So if someone's already using Retain for the email portion, there's just a module that's an add-on. So Retain has multiple pieces. There's the email archiving, of course, that we were talking about. There's the social media archiving. There's the instant messaging archiving and mobile archiving. And each one of those is a module. So if you already have Retain, it's really easy to just set up a new module for the mobile archiving. It's not necessary to have an MDM to do that, meaning on the Retain side, there's no MDM required. Now, to deploy the app, so on the Android side of it, if you're using the Retain app, to deploy it, once again, it's not necessary to have an MDM. You can deploy that on a per-phone basis. However, it might be nice for you, especially if you already have an MDM solution. It'd be a way to quickly push that out. And the same goes for the CellTrust app. You can push those apps to the phone using an MDM, a mobile device management solution. So that would be helpful, but it's not needed, meaning you can install the app on each device without an MDM. It just might take you a little bit longer because you have to actually do it on a one-off basis on each phone. And that goes for both the Retain app that's on that's on Android that pulls everything off of the phone, and it goes for the CellTrust app. That can be on a one-off basis. But to go from an email archive to the mobile archive, it's just one more module, pretty quick and easy to set up. There's just a few things you need to know, but yeah, that's something that can be done. And it's actually easier if you already have Retain to now do an extra module. And that's one of the great things that Retain has, is that it's expandable based on your needs. If you have email archiving today and you want to do social media archiving tomorrow or mobile archiving down the road, you can easily expand and do that. So it's something that it fits your needs today and it grows with you for tomorrow.
Right. Antonio had a question of which MDMs are supported for use with Retain.
That's a good question. I don't have that list off the top of my head. Most major MDM solutions are supported to be able to deploy that app. I would have to get back to you on the exact list, but if there's a particular one you're looking at, we can let you know if it's supported. But most major MDM solutions would be able to deploy that Retain app out.
Awesome. Yeah. Let's see. Oh, we have Mobile Iron or AirWatch?
Absolutely. Mobile Iron or AirWatch would be ones that would support pushing that app out to the phones. And that would work with both the Retain app and the CellTrust app that we're talking about.
Awesome. Thanks. Let's see. Let's switch gears again. I guess we've talked about mobile quite a bit. So we've talked email, social, mobile. What all does Retain archive?
So here's the idea. So this circle will kind of help when we're talking about this. So Retain archives and supports multiple email systems. It supports social media and instant messaging. It supports mobile, and it also supports web search. So let me talk a little bit about each one. So when it comes to email, Retain works with Exchange and Office 365. And it works also with GroupWise and Gmail. So with Exchange, obviously, it just ties directly to the Exchange server. It uses journaling or impersonation. The same goes for Office 365. And what's great is it ties directly to the email system. So you don't have to it looks seamless to your end users. There's nothing that has to be synced. It's just done directly through the server. And the same goes for GroupWise and Gmail. So that's great, meaning that it uses Gmail uses an IMAP connection to pull everything down and do that direct archiving. And then, so the idea here is that for email archiving, it pulls everything down. It specifically for Exchange and Office 365, it supports single instance storage, which those two email systems don't, so that now your archive is smaller. You have a smaller storage footprint. And then, of course, with all those email systems, by pulling those messages off and archiving them into Retain, you're going to speed up and make those systems more efficient. Then when it comes to social media, Retain works with Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Yammer. And what it does there, and then also with instant messaging of Google Hangouts, Link and Skype for Business, Yahoo IM, and AOL Instant Messenger. And so on social media and instant messaging, the way it works is there is a gateway. Let me pull that slide up. Now that we're talking about it, I'm going to just go there. Let me find that slide. I think I skipped it here. So how it works is it takes those social media communication and Retain, there's a compliance proxy, the Retain Social Compliance Proxy. So what it does is it ties directly to the server, and so as traffic is coming in and going out of the organization, it is routed through the proxy. And then the proxy now will be able to archive that. It will pull those messages down and pull them into the archive. And what's great about the compliance proxy is that it does more than that. It actually will monitor and filter and block instant messaging and social media. So if a person is posting something on social media that violates your policy or that is inappropriate or derogatory or shares sensitive information, anything like that, the social compliance proxy will actually monitor that, and it can filter and block that. And then, of course, it archives it as well. Even if something is blocked, it's going to archive it. Oh, and it can, if you so choose, the social compliance proxy can flag something for review. So say that somebody's posting something about your company, you want to review everything that is posted about your company and that an employee posts on social media. So that is done by having that compliance proxy. So as they're trying to post it, it won't go out to the world. It won't go out live onto the social media platform until it goes through that proxy. So it can be reviewed and then approved or disapproved and being pushed out. And then it's also archived to go back and review. And then furthermore, there is, for those people who have employees that are remote, there is an application that can be put onto Windows machines or Mac OS, and that allows, once again, it serves as a proxy on the machine so that everything that is being posted is reviewed and routed through the proxy and archived. So that's social media, and then of course that's social media and mobile, social media and instant messaging, and that's once again all archived in context. You can go back and review and search just like you can with the other platforms. So let's go back to what I was saying with the okay. Now web search is a very similar thing. So Retain supports monitoring, filtering, and archiving for Wikipedia searches, so that's Yahoo searches, Bing searches, Google searches, and YouTube searches. It's not going to archive, the results or archive the web pages, but what it does archive and monitor is what they're searching. We know employees are out there using the web all the time, using these platforms to be able to search the web, and what we're looking to do is help you be able to have oversight of what they're searching, and then be able to archive that as well. So that's the idea with the web search portion. So that's kind of Retain as an overall view. And then, of course, the mobile, and I touched on that already. But that's Retain as an overall view, that there's the email that supported social media, search, and mobile. And what's great, let me just show you this slide really quickly, is that it's all archived into one central archive. Where did my slide go? It's all archived into one central location. So if a person needs to go back, an administrator needs to go back and search the entire archive, they do one search from one UI in Retain, and all results are back. So in this particular search, you can see the search of the Retain archive was done, and we were able to see a YouTube search there where somebody is typing, somebody is searching for that term. Then you've got Twitter posts, you've got Facebook posts, you've got a chat going on, you've got mobile messages, and you can search any type of thing. You can choose the scope, and you'll be able to pull it across anything into one central archive. And that's really a benefit of that, what we like to call unified archiving, is there's one central location for all electronic communication. And that's really what makes Retain what it is and what different.
Awesome. We had a couple questions. I think you answered one of them about whether it's installed through the workstation or through the gateway. We had another one about the compliance proxy and what base operating systems support, or if that's an appliance.
So yeah, it's an appliance. So the compliance proxy would integrate with most major firewall systems, and it uses an ICAP protocol. So it would integrate there, and once again, I could give you a list of the supported firewalls, but most major firewalls are supported, and it would, all the communication is routed through that proxy and then routed through the firewall using that ICAP protocol. So, but it is an appliance, a software appliance.
Got it. Thanks. We actually have one more question about support for any IBM products.
Currently, there's nothing in the works right now to have like support for Domino or Notes or Connections. If that changes, we can let you know. But right now, the supported platforms are what we talked about, which were the let me go back here. Which are, with those email systems of Exchange, Office 365, GroupWise, and Gmail, and then the social media platforms and mobile. So at this time, no, there's not that support for IBM. Good question, though.
Okay, that was quite the in-depth on some of the things that Retain does archive. Another question, we get this all the time, is so what makes that different from other archiving solutions?
Perfect, and I touched on that a little bit with that central archive. So the areas that I'd like you to remember when you're considering an archiving solution is, one, the idea of a central archive. Retain archives all that electronic communication in one central archive that can be searched. And there's built-in e-discovery tools in Retain as well, powerful e-discovery tools that allow you to go back and do a search. As I showed you on that slide just a minute ago, when you do a search, it's one search for all platforms, and it comes in. And what's great is even with the newest release of Retain, there's more Google-like search, so that when a person goes in to search, let's see, I think that might be the next slide, it starts to give you suggestions of what's in the archive, which is also great as well. But that's one of the biggest things that makes Retain different, is that idea of a central archive of all electronic communication, those built-in e-discovery tools, so you don't have to go out and get another solution to perform e-discovery, and these search tools, these powerful search tools where you can go in, you can search that one central archive and get all the results back from all your electronic communication. And one other thing that I haven't mentioned yet is Retain takes it even one step further, meaning that if you have a legacy like ECM or another file management system, or say a SharePoint, those kind of things, Retain will actually connect to those and use their index to do a search there as well. So if you're doing a search and you want to include any SharePoint type things, Dropbox files, you can do that, or any other enterprise content management systems or file systems. As long as there's an index, Retain can tie to those and bring those into the search results. Now, that is something that is currently in the beta stage. It's not something that's currently released yet, but it is something that is coming. So just know that if you have a need for that to be able to search your file systems, that is included in Retain as well. The other part that makes it different is this idea of, once again, that central archive is not having to have a separate location for each system. It's all in one central archive, and it's really easy to use. End users have access to it. You can grant those rights to users to be able to go into the archive and access that. And as I said before, it grows with you. As you need different things to be deployed, you can deploy them. If you need email archiving today, you can archive that. If you need social media tomorrow, you can now deploy that, and you don't have to worry about implementing an entire new archive. You're just expanding it.
Awesome. Another question, especially from lawyers and other compliance. How does Retain help with e-discovery?
Good. That's a good question as well. So specifically with e-discovery, there is, like I said, there's that idea of being able to search across the entire archive. But within the archive, let's see if I have a screenshot of that. You'll see here on this screen there are certain tools that are very needed when it comes to e-discovery. There's litigation hold, so you can quickly and easily place litigation holds on messages that need that. You can tag messages, so if you have done a search and all those messages pertain to a certain case, you can tag them to pertain to that case. You can even tag them to pertain to certain projects as well. And then you can export all messages. When you've done a search, you can export those messages to PDF or PST, depending on what your needs are. And you can actually export them to what we like to call the standalone archive viewer or publisher. And what that does is you now have, so you've done a search and you have this list of a number of emails and social media messages and mobile communication. And you need to give that to an outside team. You don't want to have that outside team in your full archive. You want them to have that subset that only pertains to the e-discovery case. Well, you do the search, you export them to the standalone archive viewer, and that's fully portable, meaning you can put it onto a jump drive or onto a DVD or even directly onto a Windows machine. And now that outside team has, like I said, the standalone archive viewer where they can go through and browse that subset of the archive. They can perform redaction on those messages for the things that don't need to be in court. They can strike through, and then they can, once again, if they need to, export again from that archive viewer directly to a PDF. So those are some of the things just to be aware of that Retain helps with e-discovery. There's the search tools that are powerful, the litigation hold, the tags, and then that export to PDF, PST, and to the standalone archive viewer to perform redaction and strike out, and those things that are needed for e-discovery.
Right. We've had several people. We've been at several customers actually talk about how much they love the fact that they are no longer bogged down from their legal teams having to kind of export this manually. They can just create that subset and give the standalone publisher to their legal team, and they can do all the redactions, everything they need to do on their own. So that's been big. So another question: how does Retain work with Office 365, Exchange, Gmail, GroupWise?
Awesome. Yeah, I touched on that a little bit, but yes. So with Exchange and Office 365 specifically, It ties directly to the Exchange server and via the journal. If you're using journaling, you can archive that way, so it would go directly to the journal and pull it down, or it uses impersonation. And so yeah, once again, like I said, it's seamless to your users because it goes directly to the server and it will pull the information down that way. And what's great is with Office 365 as an example is it will tie directly to the Microsoft servers and pull them down that way. So you just need to be able to tie them there, and now you're set, and you can start archiving from Exchange in Office 365. And in particular with Exchange and Office 365, it will archive emails, all the attachments, appointments, different tasks, and it replicates the folder structure, which is really cool. Like the screen grab that's up here, you can see that it looks similar to the Outlook client, right? So now they can see that the same folders, your end users can see the same folders that they see in Outlook, they can see in Retain. And that goes the same for those who are using GroupWise. So with GroupWise, it ties directly to the GroupWise server, and it pulls the messages down that way. And once again, everything is replicated. And in every case, Retain uses single instance storage, so the storage footprint is greatly reduced, especially for those on Exchange and Office 365. And then with Gmail, it's the same thing. Like I was saying with the Office 365, is we go directly to the Gmail servers, and when we're talking Gmail, we're talking about, of course, Google Apps for business or for education, meaning that you have to have an enterprise level Gmail account, and then we can tie it that way. It's obviously not for personal Gmail, but we'd tie directly to the Gmail server and pull down the Gmail messages, any attachments, and then any appointments as well. And all of that information is archived, once again, in that central archive, and it's archived in context, so you can see the whole message string. You can go back and see, who the message was to, when it was. It was time stamped. We archived the metadata. So that's how it works for each one of those email platforms.
Awesome. We have a question coming through about Retain and where that archive data is stored, whether it's local storage or the cloud or both or what.
Oh, perfect. I think I have a slide here on deployment. So for deployment, you have the ability to have the archive on-premise. So you just take a server and you partition that server, and we use a SQL database for the metadata. And that partition server would then hold all those archive messages on-premise. You'd have complete access to that. We of course would give you support, and support's included with Retain to help you implement that. But that's something that then you would manage, or that is something that can be done in the cloud. So it's an either or. So the question was, can you do both? You have to choose one or the other. There's an on-prem version or there's a cloud version. It looks and acts the same for you and your end users, but there's no hybrid model to do both. You have to choose one. And then with the cloud, what's great is that you turn all that management over to us. So we'd manage the system, we'd get it up and running for you. You wouldn't have to worry about that. You just pay for the monthly fee, and the archive just works. And then, of course, you have access, and you have complete access to that. Your data doesn't touch any other person's data. It's fully partitioned and it's fully encrypted. Those are the options: an on-premise version that you would manage, or an in-the-cloud version that we would manage for you.
And that's a private cloud?
Correct, yes. Software as a service type setup.
Right, okay. We have to wrap up here as we are almost done. We're at the top of the hour. Two last quick things. Let's see. I guess that's the big question. We should end with that. What does Retain cost, and is the cost worth it? Good.
Really good question. Yeah, I did mention that a little bit. So once again, the quick answer is It depends. I know, don't you love that? So it depends. The cloud is a monthly fee. You can set it up to be yearly, but it is basically on a month-by-month basis. The on-prem is an upfront cost and then a renewal. Generally speaking, you can also do it as a subscription, and it's priced per user, so per seat. So however many users you're planning on archiving for email, or how many users you want to monitor and archive for social media or instant messaging and mobile, it's on a per user basis. And specifically with mobile, it doesn't matter how many devices a person has, it's based on that user. So me as a user, if I had multiple devices, if I had, an iPhone, an Android, a BlackBerry, and an iPad, whatever, that doesn't matter. It's still based on the number of users, not the number of devices. But it's priced per seat, and it's either a yearly or monthly subscription, and it would differ depending on your organization type, the number of seats, there's volume discounts, etc. So I can't give you the exact price because it is different for each person. However, just know that think of an archive as an insurance policy, right? Meaning it is going to cost you a little bit of money, but it's definitely worth it. If you're better able to manage your data, it ends up saving you money in the long run because now your email system runs quicker, runs more efficiently. You have reduced storage costs. So overall, the true ROI is better by having an archive because your overall costs are going to go down. And then if you're ever involved in litigation, which a lot of people are, having an archive is absolutely essential. So yes, it's worth the cost, and the cost will depend on your organization, and it's a per seat type thing. So I'd encourage you to check us out, to give us a try, see how it'll work for you, and make sure that you have an archive. Kind of in summary, make sure you have an archiving solution that will work best for you. And one final thought, since we're talking about retain, that I wanted to make mention of, and Sheldon talked about this a little bit, and that is this is one of the things that I failed to mention that makes retain different, and that is Infotech, which is a great research group. They're an analyst firm. They went out and they created a new report on the vendor landscape for content and email archiving. They asked if we'd like to be included in that, and they approached us. We submitted information about retain and got great reviews on that. We were awarded the best overall value for content and email archiving, and we were put as a champion in their vendor landscape, in their content and email archiving vendor landscape. So we got those 2 awards for it. If you want to know more about that, please go to our website at guava.com and learn more about what that entailed. But basically there's a few great highlights there. We had one that was stated in there that said Guava is the most complete product at its price point, referring to Retain itself, and Retain provides a wide set of tools that protect information as well as extending discovery to social media, search, and mobile. So once again, don't take our word for it. Take some of the experts' word for it, this analyst firm, on what Retain can do for you, and give us a try. Go check that information out. And once again, thanks everyone for your time and for listening. I know we went a little over. And if we didn't get to your questions, we'll be sure to answer those offline. Thanks again.
All right, thank you. We actually do have a couple more questions on the line, but it is top of the hour. We do want to be sensitive to people's time. So we will answer those offline, like you said. Thank you again for being here. And if you have any more questions, please contact you, and we will reach out to those couple people who still have questions. Thank you very much.